Everybody. I am so excited to be here. I actually have a very funny story with how I'm here in the first place that I feel like you all just need to hear. The wonderful Anna Milbach, I don't know where she is, she heard me speak in April at an event called Women Lead Change in Iowa. And I quickly got an email from her. She was like, hey, we've got this event that we're putting on. It's called Women and Money. Would you be interested in having a conversation about being one of our speakers? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So we set up the virtual meeting. I think it was a Zoom link. A couple of her friends showed up. I didn't quite know who was putting on this event. I just knew what the premise was. And I was like, yeah, let's talk. And so as we did introductions, one of the women said, it was Tanya, said, oh, hang on just a second, the treasurer wants to join. Which I was like, oh, treasurer of the organization that's putting this on, treasurer of a nonprofit, usually that's what puts on events like this. I was like, yeah, bring him in. And I'm just sitting there with like a Fabletics just zip-up jacket on, as one does in the keynote speaking world. And I was prepared for this treasurer of an organization to come on, but it was this suit and tie, very nice gentleman in a great looking car. And I was like, wait a minute, what kind of treasurer is this? He goes on to present himself as the treasurer of the state of Kansas. That was not on my bingo card that day, too, I'll be honest. It was a pleasure. And I very quickly realized, like, oh, he is such a personable person. Very easy to talk to, but I got off the phone, called my husband immediately, because he's a firefighter, so he works 48 hours at a time. And I always say that so that everybody knows that I'm married to a hot man. That's all you need to know about him, is that he's just very hot. So anyway, I am honored to be here. It was very nice to meet you that day. It continues to be a highlight for me, and I cannot wait to share one of my passions with you all, which is a conversation around generational differences. And in order to even kick this conversation off, I feel like I need to go back further so that you can understand what even drove this passion for me. And when Doug told me that he was going to talk about his wife and how his wife made a lot of the financial decisions, I said, that's perfect, because I'm going to talk about my great-grandma. I'm going to talk about my great-grandma. Her name was Freddie Hinson. This clicker is not working, and I'm not sure why, so let me give it one more go. You guys might need to click on something over there. Oh, there we go. It's working now. My great-grandma, her name was Freddie Hinson. I prepared myself, because talking about her makes me tear up every time I do, so just bear with me. I might get a little quippery here. This is the reason why I love generational differences. I spent a ton of time with my great-grandma. She talked to me about her experiences in the Great Depression. She talked to me about her experiences being married to my grandpa and driving a lot of their financial decisions. Doug didn't know this, but the reason why they bought land in Missouri, moved from Texas in 1968, was because my grandma said, I think this would be a good idea. And it's the reason why we grew up in Missouri. It's the reason why I, got to spend so much time with her on the farm in Southwest Missouri. So I love that this is Women and Money, because this is the reason why I love this conversation. She's the reason why it's driven so much conversations with me and my husband around money, how I have approached my business. And even though she's not with us anymore, I think about her every day. So, oh my gosh, I almost did it. Yay, thank you. I was so close. I knew what I was getting into. So that drove, whenever I got into my master's in strategic leadership, I found that we were having a lot of conversations around this idea of people looking for different things in workplaces. Us finding ourselves in conflict because millennials expected one thing out of bosses, but baby boomers expected another. And so whenever I got into writing my thesis, which was just a really long paper, honestly, it was a lot of pages. I didn't count. Yes, I did. It was 33. It was 33 pages, front and back. It was a lot of pages. So I wrote my thesis on generational differences. This is the only thing I have left of it, I feel like, is a picture. I was like, my husband, take a picture of me throwing them up in the air. And then I was like, now I have to pick them up because I might need this later. I am like that mean. Let me pick these up really quick. No, I loved it. I loved digging into the research and looking at what does it mean for generations in the workplace? What does it mean for us to be able to see all of these differences and influences that created the expectations that we all have today? And how can we make those work? How can we create a space where we all appreciate and understand where everyone's coming and are able to actually come closer together instead of leaning into conflict? So that was my goal. And that's what I'm excited to talk to you all about today. I'll be honest, I'm a millennial too because they're paying me to be here. And I would have done it for a participation trophy. So you could have just given me a book. I'd have been like, great, this is awesome. No, my research largely was on how can we create this space where all of our unique perspectives, all of our unique experiences can come together and create better relationships, create better cultures, and even create a better understanding for ourselves. Because getting into that research, I felt like I understood what drove me more, or what created the expectations that I had that I didn't know was really fueled by the world that I grew up in. Because whether we like it or not, we all have all of these things that have created the people that we are. Maybe it was your great-grandma, maybe it was your parents, or maybe you're going to be able to find some of those influences in what I'm going to talk about today. But all of those influences, what they're doing is they're creating something on the other side, and they're creating behaviors. They're creating decisions, they're actions, they're all of these things that we can see, right? We can see whenever someone shows up to a meeting with a hat on, and if we were from a different generation that didn't wear hats in meetings, then really quickly we see the tip of the iceberg, and then we decide whether or not that is right or wrong, based on our own experiences. Is that fair? Everybody agree with this? Cool. But the thing about generational differences is that there's way more under the iceberg. There's not just the tip of the iceberg, but that's the thing that we see. And that's most oftentimes what we make the decision on. So I have a really good example of this. I was flying to Savannah, Georgia. This was last March. Has anybody been to Savannah? Nice. Love that place. I think it's because I found an adult Capri Sun there. Yeah, and I was like, and then the beignets reminded me of like toaster strudels, so I think it just was an ode to my childhood fully. But I was on my way to Savannah, Georgia, and I was on a flight. I was in the middle seat between two men on the other side of me. And first and foremost, they did not give me the armrest, which that's the rule. If you get middle seat, you get the armrest, right? We all know that. Spread the word, because they were like all up on my armrest. And I was like, okay, I don't know what to do with my arms. So anyway, I'm sitting between these two gentlemen, and one of them was a retired gentleman to my left, and he leaned over and started chatting with me, and he was retired aviation, so he had used to train all of these pilots that were now flying planes. And I was like, well, that's really cool. But the first thing that he told me, right after that, he said, I just sat beside a kid on my way here, and I think it was his first time flying. And I was like, well, why do you say that? And he said, because he was texting on the flight, and you can't text on a plane. And I was like, oh, okay, you can't? What? And in his experience, that's true. He probably was working in the aviation industry when that was a rule. Do we remember when that was a rule? We probably also remember when we could smoke on planes. Anybody in here? Anybody in here remember those days? Yeah? Way different now, right? Way different. So he was sitting beside this kid, saw this kid take out their phone, text, and really quickly decided right or wrong. Decided this is not right. You shouldn't be doing this. He saw the tip of the iceberg behavior, right? He didn't realize that now we have this really cool thing on flights that's Wi-Fi, and that most phones, you can text on Wi-Fi. If you have an iPhone, you have iMessage. Most people have WhatsApp. If you don't, there's lots of ways that you can communicate on a plane now. And it's not that, I mean, yes, he was wrong. You can text on a plane, but I didn't fault him for that because he was basing that right or wrong off of the rest of his iceberg. So there was way more under his iceberg that was deciding whether or not this was a behavior that should happen. So if we looked underneath an iceberg, because this is just the tip of the iceberg, we see the behavior, there's way more underneath it. Okay, not that. I am a millennial because I can't not talk about Titanic when I talk about icebergs. It's still too soon for me. It's still too soon. So anyway, but what's really underneath the iceberg are things like our influences, our motivations, our values, our experiences. All of those things for him told him that this behavior that this individual was doing on a plane, texting on a plane, wasn't right. He was wrong, but it was fueled by something. It was fueled by his own experience, coupled with there was a new system that he didn't realize existed. Is that fair? And so my challenge whenever we talk about generational differences or talk about generational differences in any facet, including money, is this idea that we have a lot of experiences that are driving the way that we're acting now. It's driving the decisions that we make around money. It's driving the way that we show up with our coworkers. It's creating expectations that we have for leaders, for the world that we're existing in, for spouses. There are a lot of things that are creating the actions that we're doing every day. And what I would think is the conflict really is that we don't often talk about that. We don't often look at what shaped me, what shaped the experiences and the expectations that I have now, and then also created the really judgment tool that I use, the litmus test that I use to determine what's right or wrong, what's acceptable or unacceptable with other people. And especially whenever it comes to money, these things tell us what's possible. If we all grew up in different worlds that told us one thing was possible, and then another generation had a whole different world that told them something else was possible, it doesn't make us right or wrong, it just makes us all different. But it means that we also have to start getting curious about what's underneath the iceberg. Otherwise, we might have decisions and actions that are going unchecked because we didn't realize that they were influenced by something very, very understandably so, that could be changed or could be questioned at any moment. And that's my goal, is that we have some of those conversations. Starting with, I would love for us to take just a couple of seconds at our table. If I were just to ask you this question, who or what influenced the way that you experience or look at money today? If you were to say one person, one thing, maybe it was something you experienced in your childhood, what influenced the way that you experience money today? Okay, so let's just take literally 60 seconds, turn to your partner, and I want you to answer this question. You can do 1, 2, table, whatever, okay? 60 seconds, here we go. No. I know. I'm getting into it now. I got everybody. Get there. Either like you like to right. Right. Okay, take 30 seconds, finish your thoughts. Okay. Does anybody want to share? Who's comfortable sharing? One person. Oh, love it. Yes. You may stand, and then I will just probably restate. That way everybody can hear you if they can't, but if that's okay, go ahead. I love it. I also love that I've never said drug dealer in a presentation before, but I'm about to. So the answer was, yeah, the answer was grandma, if you didn't hear it. Her grandma didn't pay with cash, or she only paid with cash, didn't pay with credit, kept it like, not my words, a drug dealer in her brassiere. That's exactly what it was. I love it. I love that. I feel like we could probably spend all day, everybody going around and saying what influenced them, and we probably would have different things. Is that fair? Maybe people, but I doubt any of you were influenced by my great-grandma whenever it comes to money, or my single mom. You probably had your own experiences. And so the reason why I had you share that is because what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down some experiences and influences that might have influenced some of our generations, the way that we show up, whether it's for each other, whether it's in money. But first, we need to break down our generations. And the thing that I need you to know is, have we all heard generational differences, like the statement before? We've all heard it. Let me be the first one to tell you, if nobody's told you this is not scientific research. Generational differences is social research. There is not a black and white way to approach this. There's not even a black and white way to break these generations down. In fact, depending on what site you look at, they probably agree with this, or they probably have it listed in another different way. I'm going to use Pew Research Center. I really like the way that they approach research on generational differences, and they do it over a longer period of time. So here's how they are currently breaking down the generations. Traditionalists were born between 1925 and 1945. Baby boomers were born between 1946 and 1964. Our Gen Xers were born between 1965 and 1979. Millennials were born between 1980 and 96. Gen Z between 97, 2010, and what they're calling Gen Alpha right now is 2011 to 2024. Whenever I was researching millennials, the cutoff was 2000. So they've already backed that up by 4 years within the last 5 years that I completed my research. So especially these final 3 generations, those years are probably going to change. You could look any given time in the next 3 years and you'll probably see different years here. Because it takes time for these generations to get into adulthood, for us to be able to see what some of these experiences created in terms of norms in their adult lives. So since millennials, they're probably set now, but our Gen Z and our Gen Alpha will probably start fluctuating. So if you're comfortable, do we have any traditionalists in the room? Raise your hand. Any traditionalists? Okay. Do we have any baby boomers in the room? Love it. Do we have Gen Xers? Ah, we knew you all would show up. Look at it. Look at those Gen Xers. Love it. Millennials, shout out. Yeah. Okay, here's the thing for millennials. How many of you are a millennial but wish you weren't? It always happens. Yeah. So here's the thing. If you don't love millennials and you're like, no, I'm a Gen Xer, judges say you're allowed to do whatever you want. I'm the judges. How many Gen Zers are in here? Raise your hand. All right, small but mighty. We love it. And then do we have any Gen Alpha in here? Raise your hand. Okay, no Gen Alpha. They're at school right now. They're napping. I joke, but I take a nap almost every day. So that's how it works when you work for yourself. My boss is awesome. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I want to walk through some of the experiences, big influences that these generations might have had. Maybe it fits you. I'm not saying that I don't want to put you in a box. If you're a baby boomer and you're like, that was not me, then totally fine. Because generational differences can be scaffolded with all different identities that we have. Our boomers that grew up in Missouri probably have a way different experience than baby boomers that grew up in Colorado, right? So depending on your experience, maybe this fits, maybe it doesn't. But there is one way that you might be swaying. Is there anybody in this room that was born like right on the edges, the cusp? So like 2010, 96, right on the cusp. Raise your hand. Okay, you all are what's known as cuspers. Very scientific name, cuspers. We could do a whole conversation on these micro generations between each generation. But basically what that means is you might be a hybrid of 2 generations. And if you more identify with Gen X, then I would say if people ask you what generation you are, you proudly say Gen X, because nobody probably knows when the cutoff is anyway. Cool? Awesome. So let's start with our baby boomers. Let's kick it off with our biggest generation that we have ever experienced. So our baby boomers were born right after all of our friends came home from World War II. Their parents were finally back together and they started having babies. This was the biggest generation that we have ever seen in the United States, period. It still is competing for one of the biggest. Millennials are pretty close, if not tied with baby boomers, but baby boomers, it changed everything that our economy could have ever expected with the sheer numbers that they were. And so when these baby boomers got into the workplace, the economy wasn't prepared for this amount of workers. They were set up for our traditionalist number of population, their parents. We didn't have a workplace that really fit the number of them that needed jobs. So right whenever they started applying to jobs, it was a competitive experience. They worked really hard to get the job that they had, and when they got the job that they had, they probably kept it because They were raised by traditionalists who were very loyal. They were the people that made up our military. They went through the Great Depression. They had a lot of pride in the work that they were doing, and that transitioned over into our baby boomer generation who got a job and they held on to it. They worked their way up. There was this hierarchy that they adhered to. Once you worked really hard, you got a promotion. Once you got that promotion, you worked really hard and then you get another promotion, right? So our baby boomers, because they came into this economic world that wasn't ready for them, but then really caught up, we experienced an economic boom where they were very successful in their work. They could work a lot of hours. They could make good money for the time that they were in. And so what that created on the other side was this generation that identified with they had their identity a lot in the work that they were doing. So they found a lot of satisfaction, a lot of value in being able to say, this is what I do. The majority of their identity was the work that they were doing. Coupled with the idea that women started working at a much higher rate with our baby boomer generation than we had ever seen. So now you've got two working households that are spending a lot of hours at their jobs from 9 to 7, 9 to 6, 8 to 6, wherever it might be. And they're working really hard because they've got these jobs and they've taken a lot of pride in them. Our baby boomers had the majority of our leadership positions for a very long time. Our baby boomers, because they do love work, they're unretiring. There's a phenomenon in our country where our baby boomers are unretiring for either economic and or love of work reasons. So we are seeing this generation retire and then spend maybe a couple months, a couple years, and then find another job. They are going back into the workplace. I don't want to call you out, but is there any baby boomer in here that is unretired, that is on their second? Oh my gosh, I love it. Look at this. I saw 3 hands up. Do you love working? Okay, great. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you. So our baby boomers, because they've been in these leadership positions, they're still working. The Federal Reserve has actually identified that they control the majority of our wealth in our country. So our baby boomers alone have over $70 trillion of our wealth. And it's largely because they have lost parents, they've lost grandparents that have passed on their generational wealth, but now they're also taking care of those individuals. So our baby boomers that are unretired probably are also taking care of aging parents at the same time. Baby boomers, how did I do on that? Does that feel like you all? I'm seeing some nice. I'll Venmo you later. Yeah. Venmo is where you send money to Great. Amazing. That has not worked in one presentation that I did, and it's risky to try it any other time. So because our baby boomers were spending so much time working, they loved it, they were pouring themselves into their careers, they were raising a generation that we now call our Gen Xers. Oh, I buried the lead. Our Gen Xers were letting themselves in after school, unlocking the door, locking it, making their snack. Their parents said, don't call me unless someone's bleeding. Don't call me unless someone's hurt. What do we call those people? What do we call our Gen Xers? Latchkey kids. They are latchkey kids. This is a very independent generation that would come home at 3:30 in the afternoon and spend until probably 6:30 by themselves with their siblings. They also would play in the road because that was allowed at that point, right? You guys did, yeah. Just like, yeah, just go play outside. Don't answer the door for strangers. If someone calls, I'm in the bathtub. Don't tell them I'm not home. Just tell them I'm in the bathtub. Is this ringing a bell, Gen Xers? So what that created on the other side was a generation that is very independent, very savvy, very problem-solving, and they entered into the workplace with an experience of their parents spending so much time in their jobs that they immediately said, hang on, no, I want more balance. I want to be able to go to work, and I also don't want to have to miss Jimmy's softball games or, Susie's dance recital, whatever it was. And so this generation, interestingly enough, was also impacted by divorce. So their parents were getting divorced at a higher rate. Gen Xers started getting divorced at a higher rate. And so they now weren't two-income houses. They weren't raised in two-income houses sometimes. How many, if it's okay, if everybody feels comfortable, is there any Gen Xers in here that's parents were divorced? Okay. How many baby boomers' parents were divorced? How many millennials' parents are divorced? I'm raising mine. Mine aren't. Gen Z. Okay. Our Gen X were the majority of the hands, right? Because baby boomers now had two parents working in the work world, their mom wasn't necessarily home, our Gen Xers were spending a lot of time by themselves or they were spending time with their grandparents. Anybody in here spend a lot of time with their grandparents as a Gen Xer? I kind of identify as a Gen Xer because I feel like this was me a little bit. But anyway, so our Gen Xers were impacted financially by a world that divorce created because they didn't have a two-income household. And that also meant at the point that they are now looking to retirement, they probably have less money than they don't probably, the Federal Reserve says yes, they have less money. Let's just use the details, Brandi. I'm a storyteller by nature, but I do have details. They have less money than our baby boomers do because the experience that the household divided and what that did for setting them up into their adult lives, we're really seeing it financially for them, especially if we were to look at baby boomers and Gen Xers at the same age that they are right now. The other piece is that Gen Xers didn't get a ton of promotions like baby boomers did because these baby boomers were a big population and they were holding on to leadership positions because they loved it. I love my job. I'm not going anywhere. And so our Gen Xers, in order to get promotions, they had this entrepreneurial spirit where in the late 90s and the 2000s, they were the majority of our startups were Gen Xers because they weren't necessarily finding these promotional opportunities and leadership opportunities in the jobs that they were in. Now they make up the majority of our leadership. So they're in their prime money-making years because they are leaders. And what I will say to you that the research is showing is that they are this nice little middleman between two very strong generations where they are able to empathize with both. So they are bridging the gap between baby boomers and millennials so nicely because they have this patience, problem-solving, independent personality that's just really thriving in leadership roles. Gen Xers. How did I do? Yes? Anybody identify? Okay, I love applause. I'm such a theater person. More. No, don't even hear. Okay. So now our millennial generation, our friends the millennials. Our millennial generation is the last generation that remembers what it's like to be largely impacted by technology. They remember standing on this line of not having cell phones, not having Wi-Fi, not having instant access to internet, and now also growing up where that intersected their life. They're the last generation that knows what it's like to not know the answer to something, right? Because now, what do we do when we don't know the answer to something? We Google it. Boomers, what did you do when you didn't know the answer to something? Like thesaurus? Not thesaurus. Encyclopedia? Case in point. Encyclopedia. Whereas like I heard one person in one of these presentations, they were like, the pastor in town had the encyclopedias. And I'd be like, what? Do you have to go, Tom, what do you call that one volcano? It's like, what did you do? This generation is the last one that remembers what that's like. Our baby boomers, our Gen Xers remember it. Our millennials had a good experience of this, but technology came and intersected our life at a young age. Young millennials might have been around 4th, 5th grade whenever they got computers in their house. I was 16 when I got my first cell phone. Gen Xers, how old were you all when you got your first, like, let's say not the car phone. Let's say the one that you could actually get out and, yeah, the antenna, yeah. How old were you? 32. 32 right here. Baby boomers, how old were you? 40. Ready? Gen Z, how old were you? 12. 17. I have a 10-year-old niece that has a cell phone. And I hate it. I'm like, no, she doesn't need this access to me. What are you doing? Our millennials were shaped by technology in a way that we had never seen because the way that we now started communicating with each other changed. We had quicker access to people. It changed the way that we approached education. Computers were in classrooms at the point that we got into high school. So the access and resources that we had to technology information started just reshaping the way that we started looking at the world. coupled with the Great Recession. Our millennials were high school, maybe to college, whenever the Great Recession of 07, 08 hit. And so what happened was they had spent their entire, up until high school, hearing, you get a job, and then you work for this job, and you invest in your 401k, right? And then you retire someday. And we were 16 years old whenever the housing market crashed, maybe in college, and we saw our grandparents, our parents, lose their jobs after working for an employer for 20 plus years. That is me. I'm not just pulling that out of anywhere. My grandma worked for Walmart. So we lived down by the Walmart home offices in Bentonville, Arkansas. She worked there for 25 years. And when the recession hit, they met her at the door with a box and said, you no longer have a job here. She packed up her stuff and she left. So that was our experience. We saw our parents, our grandparents losing their jobs. We now started to see a world in which you could be loyal to an employer, but at any given moment, you could be there and gone the next. So what did millennials do? Well, one, there weren't jobs. So they went to school. They went to college. If they were in college, they stayed in college. Any millennials in here, how many of you have your master's degree? Raise your hand. How many of you have your PhD? Okay. Oh, nice, nice. Gen X, how many of you have your master's degree? Raise your hand. Baby boomers, master's degrees, raise your hand. So you can't see what I see, but I saw a lot of millennial hands raised, especially in proportion to how many millennials are here. Because millennials were in a really interesting spot of either entering into a workforce that didn't have any jobs or staying in college and learning more in hopes that it all would turn around. Whenever I was in high school, the message was one message, and it was go to college. Like, there was no other options. My sister didn't go to college, and I was like, are we allowed to not do what we were told? I thought we had to do what we were told. What the heck? I didn't know I had another option. Our millennials turned into our most educated generation that we've ever seen, and the majority of them, so let's say I have an actual number, 43% of millennials have college debt. And that's the highest number. I see someone like, yep, that's me. And the average debt that they have is over $40,000 in college debt. Because this is a generation that didn't have a lot of options whenever they were faced with joining the workplace. And so what that's done is it's impacted the way that they have been able to be contributors into the economy. They're not buying houses at the rate that baby boomers were buying them. They didn't buy houses at the rate that Gen Xers bought them at the same age that they were whenever they got out of college, because they were strapped with way more debt than those generations experienced at that same age. Our Gen Zers, our Gen Zer. Well, first off, millennials, how did I do? We love it. We love it. Our Gen Zers, if millennials had technology intersected into their lives, Gen Z were digital natives. They grew up in a world where someone had a phone. They might not have had it, but their parents had a phone that they could communicate on. Their parents had a computer in their house, and that really started changing the way that this generation starts interacting with the world. Because they don't know a world where, honestly, Gen Z, did any of you have landlines? Raise your hand if you had a landline. Nice. Okay. Hope. We love it. No, I'm joking. You don't have to have a landline to have hope. I love this generation. I feel like we're learning so much from them. But our Gen Zers, they don't even have to think about technology being in their lives. They never had to learn it. It just entered into their lives magically. It just became a part of their experience. Technology largely changed the way that they started looking at work. Because even if their parents worked in an office, because they were probably being raised by Gen Xers, maybe older millennials, who really wanted this work-life balance, so they weren't going to miss their kids' extracurriculars. If their parents weren't in the office, they probably had some form of connection to it. So they had their email on their phone. Their boss could get a hold of them while they were at their game. Maybe they took a call while they were there. See, Gen Z doesn't do this. This is not a phone to them. This is, right, Gen Z? Is this right? Do you do this? Is this Gen Alpha that does this? Okay, great. So Gen Z, you're still in. You're still in the cool crowd. We love it. But they did. They started seeing their parents and the way that they interacted with work, because our Gen Xers were asking for more balance. They were asking for a world where we could have both. they started paving the way for work-life balance. And so when Gen Z started getting into the workplace, not only did COVID even affirm that this is possible, it affirmed that we could have both, it affirmed we could work from home, that we didn't have to sacrifice our personal lives to be really successful at work, or our families, fill in the blank, and they started asking for it more. Gen Zers are probably very likely to ask for work from home opportunities, hybrid opportunities, or flexible working hours because they have seen a world in which it works. Not only have they seen a world in which it works with their parents, but they've seen a world in which it works on social media. Like the access that we have to people, and at a very young age, they got to see young people making money, a lot of money, on YouTube, on TikTok, whatever it might be, opened up a whole way of thinking about work that we had never experienced before. That's why now they have so much interest in financial transparency because they have access to information. They've been seeing people make money on the internet for so long, and coupled with the idea that they might not have experienced the Great Recession, so what did their parents say? Their parents said, you've got to get that 401k, dude. Start investing. Invest early. That way, if anything like that happens to you, you're not losing that much time. You invest, you make the smart money choices. Our Gen Xers are way more likely to have already started investing than millennials are. They started investing at the average, as young as 19 years old is what they found. Gen Zers, do you guys have 401? How many of you are investing already? Raise your hand. Yeah. How young were you? Your first job? Nice. Our Gen Zers are much more savvy with financial conversations because they didn't experience a recession. They had what their parents said on the other side. They had the fear, the scarcity that their parents experienced, much like what boomers experienced with their parents. And so they're actually saying Gen Z is mirroring boomers, that I wouldn't be surprised at some point if we look up and Gen Zers have the majority of our wealth because they come off of a very similar experience that their parents did on the other side. Gen Zers, how do you feel about that? Does that feel true? Raise your hand if that feels like you a little bit. See some hands raised. Yes, great. Regardless if this feels like you or not, we all had different influences. We all had different experiences that are starting to shape the way that we make decisions, that are shaping the way that we interact with each other, that are shaping the way that we interact with money. Here's what I want you to do. We only have a couple more minutes, so I want you to turn to one partner. I'm going to put all of these up here, and I want you to talk about, did any of these resonate for you? Could you see any of them making impacts on how you look at money, how you look at your work, how you look at your relationships, anything that hit home, or what would you add, okay? So turn to one partner because we don't necessarily have time for a full table conversation. One partner will take like 90 seconds for this, okay? Here we go. Yeah. No, you were falling asleep. I don't think it's really great. I don't like it. I worked at the when I was like, that's really what I had to do. But I think it's just that's why I there's like friends like I different but those are like still way friends. Okay, finish your thought. We'll bring it back. Okay. So the reason why I had you do that is because even if it wasn't these things, there are things that are influencing the way that we're interacting with the world, whether we like it or not. They're really creating decisions that we have on the other side. They're creating habits, the way that we interact with money. How many of you said, whenever I asked what or who influenced the way that you look at money, how many of you said a person? Raise your hand. So the people that raised us, their habits influence the way we interact with money. That means the habits that you have right now are really influencing the way that the people that are looking at you interact with money at some point. They're going to be sitting in this room and they're going to say, yeah, my mom influenced me or my grandma influenced me. And it creates habits on the other side. We can't help that. We're habitual beings. Our brains are constantly looking for ways to make sense of things and to make things easier, and that's what habits do. They tell us what's possible or what's impossible. The experiences that we had, my grandma losing her job told me that it would be possible one day that I would lose my job. It influenced the way that I looked at starting my own company. It influenced how likely I was to stay at an organization if I wasn't happy, because if I could be here one day and gone the next, then I might as well find another job. Millennials are less likely to stay for over 3 years than any other generation, and it would be hard pressed to argue that it could have been because of what they saw in the Great Recession. Fair? But most importantly, they're influencing other generations. All of the experiences we had, all of the perspectives that we had, the world that shaped us, the same thing is happening for every other generation. We're going to be standing up here talking about Gen Alpha in a totally different way. We're going to see new things from Gen Z in the years to come as they start getting even more into the workplace. Generational differences, our values, our motivations, and our influences are changing the way that we work together, and they always will. It's not about not experiencing conflict, it's knowing what to do with it on the other side and knowing that we actually have some power in here. Because who and what influenced our views and behaviors matters. And how often do we actually ask ourselves, who was it? What was it? Was it my experience? Is this a shared experience with other people in my generation? Do we ask ourselves, how did the people that raised me feel about money? What beliefs are helpful that they had and what beliefs maybe aren't helpful anymore? My mom she raised me as a single mom, and my husband had to constantly remind me. I will tell you, the biggest conversation we had was when I bought a snack and he ate it within 2 hours. I was like, look, that's gotta last us all week, dude. Like, we're not gonna, he was like, hey, we're not poor, man. We can go get another snack. We can get another snack, we're good. It's like, oh, okay. But the way that my mom looked at money, the way that we experienced it, influenced the way that I showed up with money with my husband we've been married 10 years now, so that was a while ago. I know, stop it. More. But if we know all of this, if we know that there are things in our lives, whether I mentioned them or not, or whether you're able to look back and go, this is what influenced me, then we have to decide what we want to keep. We have to decide what we want to build on. Because it's not just us in this room that it's influencing anymore, because there are generations below us. There are people that look up to you, that our habits are now influencing the way that they look at money. And whether we like it or not, that's a responsibility that we have. And what I would say is if we start doing this, then we're shaping a world that's going to look so freaking cool for our United States, because by 2030, women will hold 2/3 of the U.S. private wealth. 2/3. We're so cool. Oh my gosh, we're so cool. But it matters. That's why I love conferences like this, because the way that women look at interact with money, it's not only going to impact us, it's going to impact our country. It's going to impact the people that we're raising. It's going to impact their friends, what they think is possible. Because we're all that guy that's on the plane looking over and going, you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to text on planes, but it's something else. It's what's possible with money. It's what's possible in the workplace. It's what's possible as a leader or as a coworker. And if we don't check those things, then they run rampant. And before we know it, we tell someone you can't text on a plane whenever you actually can. And if you're not, boring. How boring? What do you do the whole time? The bottom line is, as women and as generations, we're better with anything, fill in the blank, whenever we get really intentional on asking ourselves, what are my values? What are my motivations? What are my influences? We're all better together. We can all agree on that, right? And I think we all can agree also that they both could have fit on the door. Like, why didn't they both get on the door? That is one thing every generation can come together on, right? They could have fit on the door. No. My goal for you is that when we see generational differences, when we see those things that maybe we identify as holding us back or looks different for another generation, that it's not as quick for us to go, hey, you're not supposed to text on a plane. We're actually quicker to get curious, to find understanding, to find maybe there's a way that's holding us back whenever we're looking at how do we interact with money, how do we interact with the world, and how do we decide what's possible for the person sitting beside us. Because those are all shaped by our own experiences. And while they can influence our decisions today, they're not black and white. We can decide at any moment what feels like a good fit for us, what we want to take forward, but what we also want to create new on the other side. And that's what I hope today has been, that you have some new ideas, you have some new goals, some new perspectives that have changed the way that you either think or do with your money. Thank you all so much. This was so nice. Stop it. Thank you. Thank you. Please stay in touch. I'm going to hand this back over. Have a great rest of the day, everybody.